George Masvidal was doing an interview. Paddy came up, Paddy the Baddy. And George said, hey, he's entertaining as hell. I don't think his skill set is going to translate to a championship within the UFC. George wasn't putting him down, by the way. That was essentially all that George said about Paddy. He just made an observation. Now, let's look at it. Do we agree? Because here's what you have to consider, guys. And this is a hard one. Most people resist this, but this is true. Here's the question. I'll form it to you like this. What level of evolution do you believe a fighter who signed to a major organization is going to make over the course of his career? And there are examples of guys that are getting better. I could turn to Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman got better after he won a world championship. Now, there was a very distinctive reason. He left gyms. He found a new skill set. Somebody taught him something. It happened to work. Jon Jones, in every single fight that he's had, has looked better than he did in the previous fight. Literally, Jon will come out with a move that we've never seen him do before. Okay, great. I gave you two examples. I've been following the sport for 25 years. Do you guys have a third example for me? Do you have a fourth example? Is it possible that we got to a fifth? Now, I'm not to say that a guy's first performance is going to be better than his last. I understand. I am trying to prove the point, though, that you are splitting hairs. It is a game of centimeters. It's very, very unusual that a fighter gets better over the course of his career. Broad stroke statement. When you come to the organization of the UFC or Bellator, you already are expected to know how to fight. You are then going to spend you guys hear about training camps? You hear that term where a guy's really buckled down. A guy in training camp is trying to refine. He is trying to sharpen. He is trying to come up with a game plan. He is going to have small skill building that usually does not and will not work. And then he is spending the other 99.9% of his time on getting in shape. That's what it's about. Every time you go into training camp, every time you go into practice, there will be some drills to sharpen up. There will be skill building. The absolute lion's share of emphasis goes into getting in shape. So how much could you grow? What is it that Paddy needs to do? What is it that Masvidal's seen that isn't enough? He didn't elaborate. But can anybody, even if in this case we're speaking to specifically Paddy, go out and get better? Because it came out for Chimaev as well. A lot of kids on the underground were saying Chimaev versus Burns, Chimaev's striking didn't look very good. That surprises me. Because striking is offense and defense. And Burns hit Chimaev with shots that would put a regular man down for the night. Chimaev even got wobbly, but never went down. If you guys watch that fight, you might be saying, well, Chael, you're forgetting round two. He went down. No, you got to touch a knee for an official knockdown. No, he wobbled. He came up. It wasn't an official knockdown. I'm just sharing with you. So defensively, we know he's got a hell of a chin. Another thing that will help keep you on your feet in those tough moments is the level of conditioning you're in. How well are your feet conditioned? How well are your legs, your stability points? Chimaev was moving around very well, including at the end of the fight when we all knew he was exhausted. My goodness, that was a war. Were two trains that crashed into each other. Chimaev could have gone longer. And then you look at the offensive part. Was he landing? Hell yeah, he was landing. Did you see Gilbert Burns' face after that fight? He landed plenty. So I don't know quite where that concept came from. But I will share for you, if you believe that's true and you think you're going to see him in a year from now, he's going to look a lot better. He's not. He's not. That's just not what MMA and training is about. It's about getting in shape. Truly. So that you can push harder than your opponent. And you sprinkle in some of the skills. But guys, that's not something new. I came through college athletics. The coaches didn't come and recruit us out of high school so that they could come and teach us things about wrestling. Skill building was a part of practice. Make no mistake. It's a broad stroke statement. But when they came in and gave you the scholarship in the first place, it's because they looked at the skills that you had, and that's what they were buying. And I will tell you, it is extremely rare. It's one of the reasons that when Jon Jones comes out and does something different, everybody stands back and goes, wow, what a talent. Or Kamaru Usman goes out to Colorado for 4 months, gets in there with Gilbert Burns and starts breaking out skills that we haven't seen him do before. One of the reasons, my goodness, 4 months? And the guy who was already the best got better? Wow. One of those things. But I've asked you to give me a third example or a fourth. I challenged that you couldn't get to 5. The skills that you will use when the house is on fire and when you are locked in a steel cage in front of the world, half naked, the house is on fire. Those skills are going to be ones that you learned 10 years ago. Those are going to be skills that you learned at 14 years old. You weren't great at them until you were 20. You weren't perfect at them until you were 25. But those are the skills you're going to use. It is extremely rare, outside of the two examples that I gave you, that somebody changes anything within training camp. Mike Tyson has talked about this to great length. Rickson Gracie has talked about this to great length, which is everybody has a plan until you get hit in the face. You are not going to go to a skill that you worked on focus mitts with your trainer for the last 8 weeks. No way. When you get hit in the face, you are coming at him with what you do best. Even if there's a better way and you've been shown it, you don't know it. You don't know how to do those things. The body mechanics, the physiology required to go out there and execute in full speed when you're nervous, when you're faced with fight or flight, it's going to be stuff that you learned when you were a child. So I only ask you that because if Paddy the Baddy's raw, I don't quite know where he's raw. I understand that he hasn't been tested yet with wonderful opponents, but the tests that he has had, he's passed with flying colors. And you could carry that over to Chimaev because that was the attempted knock on him as well. Well, he's not good enough. He's not ready. He's not fighting ranked guys. All right, well, you give him a ranked guy. As a matter of fact, you give him the number 2 ranked guy in the world, won that fight too. So it's just one of those questions, like, what is it that you mythically think is going to happen? Do you have an ability at 28 years old, at 35 years old, to get better at anything? It's a tough question. You like to believe that you do. You like to believe that you have an open mind. You like to believe that you're still curious. You'd like to believe that, by God, I'm stubborn enough and I got the work ethic and I'll put the time in and I can get better. I'm just asking you, who does? And even for those ones that do, be very small. I think we agree on that. I mean, we're playing a game of inches here. But are they getting better than the opponents just because they went and tried something new, right? Everybody's doing the same thing in the same sport with roughly the same skills. If everybody goes up a quarter inch in a different area, you haven't built a gap. It's a complicated question. It's a tricky spot. You will see fighters that don't look good and then all of a sudden they do, but you can put your finger right on what it was, and it's generally conditioning. And that's not just the body, that's also the mind. Robbie Lawler is one of my favorite examples. Robbie Lawler has been a handful from day one. From day one, I think he was 19. Stepped in, fought Aaron Riley. At that point in time, it was the greatest fight that I had ever seen. He was a pain in the ass. But over the course of Robbie's career, there was a way to beat him. Deal with some of that power, get your hands on him, tire him out a little bit. When round 3 comes around, he won't be the same guy. That's true. That would be a very fair critique of Robbie Lawler. When Robbie went on his run to a main eventer and ultimately to a champion of the world, he was going just as hard in the 5th round as he was in the 1st and 2nd round. It was different. Because, okay, this is what happened. As good and powerful as Robbie was, he never got an emphasis on the rounds, on the energy management, on having his cardio and his conditioning up. Once he understood that, it changed his whole career. And generally, that's the number one thing and the only thing that you can get over a hold of a guy and get him to work on. If you have a hard-working, dedicated, disciplined guy who shows up in shape, he shows up ready for that, very hard to then teach him anything else at a certain age. I would just tell you, even from the collegiate level, I went through all levels, right? I went through the amateur, went through the collegiates, went to the professional. I would just tell you, even on the collegiate level, when you're 18 years old when they pick you up, you're done with that university and saying goodbye 5 years later. Even at that level, those coaches who are a little smarter, who are a little bit better, are not trying to change you and teach you how to wrestle. They gave you a scholarship that they bought you because they saw that you learned how to do it when you were 12 and 13 years old. It's just one of those things. It's a very interesting thing. If you think that you've seen a guy, but he's young enough and he has enough time, that's always the default button. But if I ask you to provide me an example of somebody else that was once in his shoes and made massive gains after being in the pros, you're going to be very hard-pressed to give me an answer.